says, is this feasible? If it is, how would the black world go about this? So this thing is going to take us to Twitter, I think. And it's going to take us to a tweet from my brother Kamjiverse. Kamjiverse says, I'm not one of those who believe in separating from North Africa. Black people should dominate and blacken North Africa. That is true strength and black power. This was the only attachment to this promise. Let me read that again. I'm not one of those who believes in separating from North Africa. Black people should dominate and blacken North Africa. That is true strength and black power. I like that tweet. Let me see if others commented on what they say. He says, you discovered gunpowder last week. Relax. Okay, some hater. Afroculture says, make North Africa black again. That's a good one. Someone says, yeah, Egypt could crush every African military easily. A lot of Kamji's posts, just like the brother Greathouse, get a lot of little hate under them. But all the same, that's an interesting concept. What do we, as people who are Pan-African nationalists, people who believe in black power and black empowerment, what do we do with North Africa? Some on this panel in the past have suggested we just leave them be. Others have suggested, no, we gotta straighten that out too. We gotta take that back as well. We're gonna talk about it later on. The brother Aishospe's interactions with those Arabs. We're gonna talk about that tonight. But with that said, let me hear from the panelists before we do anything else. Buana, is this feasible? What you see Kamjiverse talking about in his tweet?
No, Kamji is he looks at it from a historical perspective. There are many black people in North Africa, Egypt, and all those places that look just like me and you, Koku. Nubia, Kush, all them places, they look just like me and you. Ethiopia, but the Arabs and the other people who've come into that area have been able to gain power in that area. And when with power, you're able to create the rules, you're able to create certain kind of controls. Not only that, you have Islam too, and that influence, that took away from the original culture of them areas. Me personally, if I was Nigeria out at like how Trump want to take Greenland, I would try to take back some of those territories, reclaim some of those territories. And I know that'll spill into a big, long asshole war that'll last forever because those people been living in those territories forever. But you must, if you really want to do something, you must get them out. You got to get them out. Will that ever happen? I don't think so. But I wouldn't be so inclusive of those territories until the rightful people are put back in a position of power. I think that the black people who look like me and you in those areas have been subjugated almost to second to third class citizenship. They have really no real rights, and real say in those governments that is governing over them areas. And I think that there needs to be a renegotiating in the world. Just like as we was talking about last week, the world is realigning itself. So the Africans, and I know people will say, well, not everyone is a Bantu African, Buana. Not everyone, some people are Neolithic Africans, some people are different kinds of Africans. So you can't just limit it to just Bantu Africanism and say, well, we should be dominant in those areas. Okay, so the people who, even though they may not be Bantu, they still look like me and you, and they've been subjugated because of their skin color. Let's call it for what it is. So to regain that power and reinstitute control in them areas, then I'll feel like we'll be cooking with grease. But I do not want to, when we talk about North Africa, everybody thinks Islam, they think of Arabism, they think of all these kinds of ideas. No, 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 no. That needs to be replaced, if I'm being honest. But if not replaced, renegotiated. Renegotiated where, just as in Brazil, you have 80 million people in Brazil who've been subjugated by a European class of Portuguese who went there. There needs to be more power from the black base that's building these countries and causing these countries to continue. There need to be more power. We need to be more power hungry in the world. And I ain't ashamed to say that. We need to be more power hungry. Power hungry. And not just accepting this paradigm that exists. Who made these arrangements where we become second and third and fourth class and accept our fate? F that. F that. F that. And I don't know. Maybe it's just me just talking, but I believe that black people need to be more power hungry, just as Trump is, and all these other groups and kinds of people who fronting and coming up in our face. Marcus Garvey said the world is built on bluff. What make another man better than you? Just because of his skin tone? Fuck that. Fuck that. I don't believe that, Goku. But unfortunately, the world has been made to believe these things. And these are bluffs. These are bluffs. You know, but that's my position. I'll leave it. I don't want to run on. I'll leave it.
So, Buana, when we get that power to make such demands, how should we do it? As Trigger asks in the follow-up, I guess. He says, do we do it in terms of conquest, or some would suggest through assimilation? Which one is it?
Well, historically, if you're talking about being able to exert yourself, it has to be through conquest. And that's an ugly word for black people. Because black people don't want to treat people unfairly. Besides other black people, of course. You know, they don't have this tolerance in subjugating and treating people unfairly because we've been treated unfairly. So we must find out some kind of, if the black people want to be civil, let them be civil. Even though it's anti-historical. But I say that you have to control, if you don't control the world, because we always talk about defense, we always talking about mounting some kind of force in the world. Bakari always talking about these things. We have to talk in terms of on these kinds of levels. Why do you think that the so-called most powerful country in the world has never invaded North Korea, even though North Korea is one of the smallest places on the planet? Why? Because they have the power, the military might to control the area, and not only that, if you try to impose your will in those areas, then they can send a nuclear missile your way. Sure, you could get rid of them because you have enough power to do that, but they have enough power to exert harm to your people as well. Harm to your people as well. But me personally, when you talk about conquest, that's an ugly kind of word for a lot of people. But if you want your home back, what you willing to do for it? You know what I mean? What you willing to do for it? I don't know. I can't answer some of these kinds of questions. Not me by myself. Collectively, we have to get together and decide what we're gonna do. Because that's not a question for me myself on an individualistic level. You know.
Anything that you have to fight to get, you have to fight to keep. That's what you have to understand. Nothing is given to you, especially if something was taken away from you. You have to, once you fight to get it or the other person concede, you have to fight to maintain it.
So that's your response to the problem as well, right, Kofi?
Well, on Trigger's question, as far as like once we get power, what will we do with it? Will it be through conquest or diplomacy? I could walk in and chew gum at the same time. You know, I could, whatever is fitting at the time, I'll do it. If my power is being questioned or they're poking the bear, it's time to show military might. Again, we gotta go look at our history. You know, we had in that region, we had like Taharka, and we had a lot of African generals and African warlike kings that waged war on the Hyksos and the Syrians and all the people that try to from the north, from Asia Minor, from the Levant region, that try to invade Egypt, right? We're not strangers to this. We may be strangers to the history, but we're not strangers to our military might. We just have to get refamiliar. But to the original, my comment to the original prompt or whatever, I'm gonna start off with what Garvey said. Garvey said, "European for the Europeans, Africa for the Africans," and I'm gonna add, the Middle East. This is me being gracious. I explained to you why. The Middle East for Middle Easterns. So already the word Middle Eastern, I tell my kids this all the time. They know what I'm going to say. The Middle East is just a political construct, right? There was no such thing as the Middle East before. So we got to understand where these Arab people came from. And a lot of you, and I challenge you, I know I'm going to say something you're not even going to like. Africa's first open enemy, like, was people from Asia Minor and Arab Islam. The white man, the European man from the Caucasus Mountains, from the cold caves of Europe, is way more merciful than the Arab. Why would I say that? Look at history. Look at South Africa. Look at West Africa, right? All the places where Europeans had a colonial foothold. We got them out. It's like, you know what? I ain't got no time for this. I'm gonna let you niggas have your land. Okay, we're gonna get out of Nigeria. We get out of the francophone nations and stuff like that. They may have little strings here and there, but as far as like direct colonialism, as far as day to day being in your country and we're the rule of law. Okay, we'll give you your independence. At least the white man has done that. The Arab has been there longer than the white man. The Arab has been there longer than the white man. Even when you listen to John Henry Clark, he says, if it wasn't for the invasion of Arab Islam, Africa never recovered. Right? I think the last dynasty, Black dynasty, was the twins in the UK. I think it was 22nd, 24th dynasty. Was the last Black dynasty, and that's how you had the people that we're talking about in right there in Ghana and Benin, and the doggone people over there. They all moved down over there. Africa never got a break because then they kept coming and coming. Why do you think it's a bunch of Muslims in West Africa? So Dr. Clark says we never recovered, and then all of a sudden we're trying to bounce back from Arab Islam, and then you got the Portuguese and the English and all these other people coming in. We never recovered from it, but at least them white people, they left. The Arabs are still there. The Arabs are still there, and I think oh my gosh, where there's still slavery going on there. Oh, I forgot what country in North Africa where there's still slavery happening. The final frontier for Pan-Africanism and African unity.
Mauritania.
Yeah, it could be. It's Morocco, and it's not that one though. It's in Morocco too, but I think it's also in Libya. That's still happening. How can we say we're Pan-Africanists and you given Africa's first open enemy where slavery is still happening? You know what I'm saying? That slavery is still happening. They say, well, I'm a Pan-African, I'm about my people. No, you're not. That is a sign of weakness. You have to take your land back. The Middle East, if you go further back in time, people will say, well, I'm going too far, but no, I'm going to keep going far. Even the Middle East region area was controlled by Kemet. The Mediterranean, in the Aegean Sea, they had satellites. They had islands that people, the people of Kemet controlled. Right? It's only until like later on they were like, okay, these people from Asia Minor, they keep coming. All right, they're at the first cataract of Kemet. You know what I'm saying? We got blockades on the Nile. We have here, as long as they stay on the outskirts, but they keep coming, they keep invading. So no, the true liberation, true Pan-Africanism and unity, which we may never live to see in our lifetimes. But I think, like either Buana or someone says, we have to want it. We have to know where Africa is slowly waking up. We have to realize like this is also our homeland, and we were pushed out of it about 2,000 years ago. pushed out about 2,000 years ago, and is ours. I don't know how it's gonna happen. It's not gonna happen by no Muslim black person that's a Muslim that recognizes the caliphate. Their religion has to go. It has to be your it has to be race and African identity first. That's going to be the driving force. That's going to be the driving force. I don't know how it's going to happen or when it's going to happen, but I know it's not going to be based upon religion. It's not going to be based upon local politics. Well, I'm Sudanese, or I'm just Ethiopian. I'm just from Kenyan. Like, no, all of East Africa got to get their shit together. And they have to recognize as Islam as the enemy. And some black heads may have to roll. And that's the problem. Because when you talk about power, right, you're gonna have some people that are that's subordinate. So when you have your people like Idi Amin, and I'm not saying this is just war. This is just science and the history of war. You know, have some people fall in line. The heads have to roll. That's how you got your Pol Pots, your Idi Amins, and you have some people that just like, okay, you're not with this. That's it. You're done. Because I don't want you to be to hinder to this new movement. So something dramatically is gonna have to happen. Something dramatically got us in this situation. Something dramatically has to get us out of situations. There's gonna be no pussyfooting about it. Off with the Arabs, Islam's heads. Sorry, it is what it is.
Appreciate that, Kofi. I'll be honest with you, I don't really differentiate them from white folks. I consider all that to be white, personally. But good stuff, Kofi. I appreciate that for real. Let me mix up a little bit. Let me hear from Black Steel at this point. Black Steel, what say you?
All right. So are we discussing what to do about Northern Africa, about the placement of the Arab population?
Yes, sir.
In a perfect world, they would just up and leave, right? But again, they've been there for so long, it would be very difficult to dislodge them. Difficult, but not impossible. But here's the thing about African people, man. We're very nice, you know? I remember something Dr. John Henry Clark said. He said the white man never had to fight his way on any shore. And I was thinking about how basically whenever the European went exploring and whatnot, they weren't usually greeted with a swarm of arrows. Most times they were welcome. They were given gifts, given food. They were helped around. African people, like people anywhere, have been warlike. They've been conquered. They've been conquerors. But I think that our greatest strength is many times our greatest weakness. And that's the fact that we are so friendly to outsiders, right? That has been used against us multiple times. I would say this. I would predict that most African nations, so let's say it's this hypothetical African world power that exists, right? I would say that more than likely they would come up with some kind of arrangement to coexist. And what would happen is the Arabs would wait until they felt like they had amassed enough power, and boom, they would then come and take over again. So you can't have that fifth column, so to speak, in your ranks. And I think that's part of our problem is that we don't have an African-centered worldview, and because of that, we've allowed too many people within our who are our open enemies. You can go back in history, you can read about how some European missionary came and he was given safe conduct, and then when the Europeans showed up, boom, he helped them conquer, show them where all their secrets were. So that's the problem, is that I think it has to do with our psyche, with our mentality. We are friendly people, we are kind people, we are loving people, but then at the same time, we're on the bottom of the hierarchy when it comes to being exploited. And I think there has to be some changes in that. Africa has to come up with the mindset of we're not going to be exploited by anyone. yet. You know, we're not going to let anyone take our land and take our resources. So I don't know. I definitely understand the need to, because you can't just leave them there. Okay, we're gonna let them sit there and be all some kumbaya hakuna matata type of stuff. That hasn't worked historically with them, right? But at the same time, you see the world is basically dividing into armed camps. We're coming back into a multipolar world with, you got the West, you got Asia, the Chinese and whatnot. It's time for Africa to carve out a place in this multipolar world, right? This is something that we have to come from. We cannot no longer let a handful of psychopaths, a handful of pedophiles who run the world continue to threaten all of humanity. So this is just something that we're gonna have to do. How could it be accomplished? Again, uh, if it comes down to it, they gotta fall back. But like Kofi said, you gotta be ever vigilant. So let's say, hypothetically speaking, okay, these African nations, which there's still a large black population in these countries. It's the Sahara Desert, so it's pretty sparsely populated, but there's still a significant amount of African people who are there. You got to be vigilant. You can't be in a situation where, okay, we're gonna let these Arabs come in and do their thing, and they can, worship Allah in peace, and we won't bother them. No, because they're not going to be content with that. They're going to be content with trying to work with their brothers and sisters in Saudi Arabia, in Levant, in Lebanon and whatnot, to try to spread the word, because they have a evangelical religion. They feel the need to spread their religion to everybody else, and they feel that they're doing us a favor. So I don't think they can be just left alone. I would think that, hey, we could all get along, but history has proven we can't all get along, and history has shown that we can't work with other people as far as living in Africa. Because whenever we let them in, be it the Europeans, be it the Dutch, English, or in East Africa, it always turns out to be they always betray us, right? But I think we have to realize we're at war. I think that the war mindset needs to be our mindset, because we don't realize that we're at war. No matter how hostile these individuals may be to us, right? They may take a licking, they fall back, and they come back with even greater resilience. We have to be as resilient as they are. I'll leave it there. Thank you.
Appreciate that, Black Steel. Last but not least, man, RBG, Real Black Gentleman, is this feasible what Kamji is talking about?
Yes, it is. It can't happen overnight, but it is very, very, very feasible. The thing is, as Africa, if we're talking about Africa and Islam isn't just affecting West Africa. If people are not paying attention, you know what I'm saying, over there in Tanzania, you know what I'm saying, and Oni and them, like you see what's happening if you pay attention to the characteristics of the leader, you know what I'm saying, over there. She, you know what I'm saying, is a Muslim. If you know about Tanzania, you know, Zanzibar was an island that was the Muslims where they had slave trade. It's an ugly island. And you had the mainland. But she, you know what I'm saying, because they have the power sharing, they kind of go Muslim, you know, Christian, you know, kind of do the back and forth thing with that. So, you know, say even Mozambique, you know what I'm saying, Congo is some Arabism in there too. Arab is still on the march. Let's not get this confused, especially in East Africa. Let's not get this confused. You can do it. When we talk about Arabs, 80% of Arabs are in Egypt. And so that's where a lot of their push goes. A lot of their push goes north-south through Sudan. You know what I'm saying? Africa needs a rapid support force, just like the Sudanese. You know what I'm saying? And I mean, it could obviously come from Nigeria, but Nigeria is still conflicted with itself. Wanda said, you know, understanding our greatest strengths, our greatest weakness. Nigeria is an example of black people's greatest weakness, of just black people just tearing at each other. with the Nigerian Civil War. There's no need for that. I mean, just the way that it went down is crazy. It's basically three groups fighting against each other. It was ugly. It with the religion, Christianity too, because Nigeria needs a traditional revival. And a lot of that can come from the center of the country where it isn't so Muslim, it isn't so Christian. A lot of the people in that middle belt do have a sense of traditionalism. Still, I recognize that, right? Big scale, Africa's going to have to organize politically. The political units got to be reduced. I've said it. I'll say it a billion times. After these clusters of confederacies, you cannot have 40 black nations and 40 black agendas. It will not work. 40 turfs, chunks of turfs for these white people and Arabs to, pluck at one by one, while 40 different agendas are will not work. Congo and Tanzania, again, I know what Tanzania. If you connect those two territories near the equator, just into that, you would have a coast to coast territorial unity, which I think is important for trade. Instead of having ships going around the Cape of Africa, down the Cape, down in South Africa, you could cut off that trade and send it through the middle. Again, I don't think that naturally. I think you'll have enclave nations. I think Uganda, Rwanda, Burundi, places like that, they probably can be kind of isolated out from that. And I think that those people do. I mean, it is what it is. They are independent on their own just cause. And you will have enclaves. You will have Lesothos, like in South Africa, because Lesotho is surrounded by South Africa. It's not South Africa for its own reasons. And it's good that it's not South Africa. However else it can be influence or whatever. It's its own country, right? You gotta have some enclaves, but you do need coast to coast. You gotta have this equatorial belt. If you can't have that, you gotta have, if you're gonna go into North Africa, you just look at the numbers. If it turns into like hardcore Arabism, Egypt is gonna go heavy west across North Africa. It's gonna have a monster of a so-called rapid support forces. You understand? This is what's going to happen, because it's like, it's like 95 million, people. Now, you do realize that even in Egypt, there are some black people. It might be grim for them because they might get picked at, but you always find some darker skinned Egyptians who will consider themselves Arabs to be on the side if you can get contact and work with them, right? You know what I'm saying? You got to have this like Sahel region locked up. Again, ideally coast to coast. You can't do it with Sudan though. So, like I said, South Sudan, Central African Republic, Chad if Chad is critical, I don't know what Chad doing. I don't know what they doing. They next to Libya, Sudan, Egypt, and next to the AES. I don't know what they doing. A lot of these enclave-isms when it comes to the geopolitics, a lot of that has to shake or break. You got to have a coast to coast band of just wall to wall, just unity politically, the rules from coast to coast, the rules. And whoever the leader is the leader. It might be, it'll probably be real strong manish. You'll have it doesn't necessarily have to be. Hell, if you can get the people, democratically, educated and knowing what's going on, you can have traditionalism and you can have current events. You can do that in the same day. It can be done. You know how they whitened North Africa? Because they got all the men. But you know why they're not as dark as us? Because hell, it'll only take 2 generations to turn a white person into a pretty nappy black person. Because the women had enough sense to run away. The women right now are running to Dubai. That does not help. What will happen is they'll have a son. They'll make him out to be the axe to go against the African forest, because look at him. He looks like us, but his daddy is Arab as fuck, probably rich and on some agenda, on some kind of business swags type shit. I'm telling you, it can be done. And honestly, if you can dominate it and blacken. The only way you're going to blacken it is you know what I'm saying. People going to have, you know what I'm saying. They're going to have to dip into that sauce. And so that's part of it. It's just naturally. It's just we call it assimilation, but it's not really assimilation. You got to dominating means having your military on fleck to defend against basically Egypt, yo. And you can do that, but you got to have the center because that's where all your minerals are. And that's not to say there's not minerals in West Africa either, but we know what's in the Congo. That has all the shit that everyone needs. We know that. They know that. You gotta band up. The African nations are a Rothschild construct. It's a Rothschild construct. When we talk about Berlin, the founder of that was them Rothschilds for real. And so that's why the AES is gorgeous. I mean, again, black people have tried to do this in the past. There are economic, you have ECOWAS. I'm talking about the rules, politics. You got to have one country, ideally coast to coast. These constructs called nations that people all prop up, and I got an army in this turf. All that gotta go. The map has to be radically changed. I know y'all hear me talk, but y'all don't. When you see these African nations, you gotta like scramble that up and see a whole bunch of big nations with a couple smaller nations in there. You know what I'm saying? Little enclaves, but you gotta have some coast to coast. Gotta be coast to coast. You can do North Africa, but you really need Central and Central Southern Africa. You only need South Africa, but you got to get Botswana. You might need Botswana, Congo, Mozambique. You got to, if you're going to go after the Arabs, you got to get East Africa too. Africa's big, a lot of moving parts, and you got to reduce the moving parts by reducing the political units. You cannot have 40 different African nations at all. It is in fact a Rothschildian construct. You can talk about Berlin Conference, but you have to talk about the the African Association, the precursor to it. That was that Rothschild, when you know what Rothschild is, we got to keep digging a little deeper. I wish I never heard John Henry Clark talk about, the Rothschild founded that. I'm telling you, I found that out a couple years ago. I don't hear no one talking about that. Oh, for real, them peoples who started all this breaking up of this? Oh, we got to change this map. We have got to swallow our pride and make business decisions about political turf in order to even go up and run up with some business. Oh, we trying to buy you out. Yeah, we trying to buy you out. Yeah, we want your bitches too. That's all I got to say.
Real Black Gentleman, Trigger Happy in the chat, would like to remind you of the Barbary slave trade. He said you will be surprised that it's the reverse of what you said in terms of blackness in 2 generations. Does anyone else have any thoughts about anything they read in the chat or saw or heard on the?
Yes.
Sorry, go ahead.
Quickly, and to build on what the brother just said just now, to build on it, the problem is in America. On this point, FBA has a point. And I know people say, "What FBA has a point?" There's this popular YouTuber. His name is Myron Gaines. Now, if no one knew, they would think that he is a regular black person because his name is Myron Gaines. But he is really, a Meru Fidel, and he comes with a particular baggage and mindset and thinking. So a black person in Egypt, he may be a black person who looks just like me and you, but because of his Arabic mindset, he goes from Kwame, Amadou, but he really thinks like Hakeem Wadafari, he really thinks like that. And if you put them in an area, they will still create a problem. You must get them all out. Or if you don't get them out, you have to get the ideology out. You have to get the thinking out. Because, like I say, the North African problem really and truly is you have black people mixing with Arabic people who are creating a buttress group of people who are also working against the original black people in that territory. It's just creating greater and greater issues and problems. So if you don't get the people out themselves, you must get the mindset out. That's all I wanted to say, Coco. I'll leave it.
We also, I'm also curious to know if people feel that having absolute power also means subjugation. Because to me, that you're becoming what you hate. So some people like the Hebrew Israelites will say like, yeah, because when we get power, we're gonna have you in slavery. So I hope people doesn't mix up power with subjugation. And I understand if some of us feel that subjugation is power because that was done to us and that was used as a form of power, but that's not usually used a form of power. I remember years ago I was looking at a documentary about slavery in America, and it's really saying, well, yeah, the black person's enslaved, but also the slave master is also enslaved too, because that slave knows that he's not supposed to be doing that, and that slave master also knows he's not supposed to be doing that. So he always got to do what? Watch his back, watch his back. So I guess I'm kind of answering my own question that I have, but I just hope people don't confuse subjugation and power being the same thing.
I don't know, Kofi, I hear what you're saying. I do not, me personally, let me speak for myself. I do not want to subjugate anyone. But the issues of power, see, the thing is, when you draw this line, because you don't want to be absolutist, and I understand that, because you don't want to oppress anyone else, and it's an ugly word, especially in black people's lexicon, because they've been subjugated, so they're very careful with that. But I'm telling you that if you permit certain people within your territory to have certain kinds, when they too free, they can say, well, listen, it only become a matter of time where he can say, well, let me remove you and replace you with me. So as long as you could live peacefully in a territory that's run and governed by me, and that's okay, and it never come a time where you feel like you could buttress against that and say, well, let me run over you and your people as well, we are falling into the same trap. We are falling into the same trap. So I don't want to be enslaved by oppressing other people. But how the world actually works, man. I wish we could live in a world where we don't have to worry about these things. But everybody is watching their back in the world. America has to watch their back because they feel that they're going to be replaced, even though they're the top dog right now. Right now, Rome had to do it. Egypt had to do it. All these are the real discussions we really need to have. If you sit in the first place position, there's going to always be people who trying to take your crown, bro. That's just how the world works. So you have to live in that kind of reality. If you the top dog, understand there always gonna be hungry dogs out there who trying to get your crown. So you have to live in that reality, but you have to have a say so in the world as well. Because if not, if you think an idea of sharing, brother, you gonna end up in your subordination. It don't need too long when it could come to that. Because the hungrier dogs, they're gonna take you. They say, "Oh, he believe in sharing. I believe that I should run it." That's how these people think, bro. It's an unfortunate kind of conversation, but I kind of try. I want to live it. I want to talk real things. Yeah, I mean, I don't want. Well, let me leave it.
So basically, you're saying if we were to have our way, it will have to be a democratic dictatorship monarchy. And the reason why I'm saying that is because I would say it need to be democratic as far as like the people, the black people, the black African people elect their leaders, because you don't want corruption, human nature. But at the same time, it's gonna have to be like a dictator. It has to run like a dictatorship and a monarchy in a way, as far as like this is a democratic system, but we're only giving certain people rights. If you want to come here, if you're a foreigner, you want to come here and do business and things like that, yes, we could do that. But you cannot get any position within this thing. Like, look at you. Look at the United States Emirates. You think not any Arab person can just come under? You have to be a particular type of Arab. And the one, you think an African or a European could be on the level of Prince Salamani? No. That's not happening. They have levels to this. They have who's accepted, who isn't. We need to have a organization where it's like there's no way you get it in by just skinning and grinning and get a position. No, You have to let them know we could only do business, and that's it. You want to stay for a little while? Fine, you stay for a little while, do business, and get the fuck out. Nice.
Absolutely, absolutely, and that's the. I understand the brothers want to live in fairness, and it shouldn't matter the color of your skin. All I am saying is the world. Have you ever, Kofi? Have you ever seen a white woman married to a Chinese man with power, great power? I'm talking about presidencies. But if you go all over Africa, one African president was married to a French military or police officer, and that was allowed to go in a country full of black women. That should not stand. That should not. That's disgraceful. That's saying, well, we do business. We open to everybody. You know what I mean? We do business in the world like this. The world doesn't operate that way yet. When we get to the fair world, where people don't perceive things based off of skin color alone, that's fine. But until we get there, brother, I am trying to deal with the reality that's in front of me, not eventually how we would see the world to be in the idea of fairness. And we both know that the world does not exist on fairness, brother. And like I say, this is a sticky discussion because the black brothers them don't like these kinds of ideas because it seems oppressive as they were oppressed. But I'm just trying to approach it in a way that how the world actually operates. You know what I mean?
We need to get a W. Again, as long as we get a W, hey, like you said, the world is not fair. You know, gun, germs, and steel. You know, white people use they and I always say white people never came into Africa not once guns blazing. A military tactician would never do that, right? They had to learn and study us. Then they screw us from the inside, from the inside out, and we have to play that game as military tacticians. We have to. Again, I don't want to repeat myself, but it could happen. It's just I think it starts with united sub-Saharan Africans uniting together as one conglomerate from east to central to west. Recognize their blackness, move in blackness, and then look north. And like, you know what? Senegal be like, you know, we have a scholar called Sheikh Anta Diop, and he spoke about this, that. And Hidefai Obenga, he spoke about that. Wait a minute. We need to get that back. And I think slowly but surely we'll get there, but we have to be united, be on one accord, and stay the course.
I just want to point out, too, that because of the interaction we've had with these folks, whether you want to break them down into individual groups, Arabs, Christians, this, that, but because of what we have to deal with this enemy that we've had, we are always going to be affected. And I want people to, if you haven't thought about that before, to think about that. We're always going to be affected by our interaction here. Even when we get to that place where we have our power, we have our nations, we're good, we're straight, we're still going to have to keep this fucker in our rearview mirror. Always now. All right. If not, we're right back in it. If there's no last thoughts here, man, let's go to Shoot the Breeze topic number 5, our final topic for tonight. And in fact, it continues this same conversation a bit. Should be something 5. Did I write that? Right. Oh, yeah.